book, This Far by Faith, by Fox News analyst and author Juan Williams, provides a penetrating look at how spiritual faith has played a pivotal role in the social, political, and economic empowerment of Africans brought as slaves to America. Sunday continues to resonate as a day of special spiritual meaning to millions of African Americans.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand.
Well, This Far by Faith is inspired by the idea that the African American religious experience, and is so intense, so much a part of every minute of our lives in this country, and yet in a way invisible, because people don't always talk about it. We see it in every way and every day. You can see it expressed. God, recreate me. God, give me the opportunity to be born again. This is not a limited experience to people of any one color or any one class. And you know what's so intriguing to me? As we speak, that evangelical Pentecostal movement is the fastest growing representation of faith in America, and it tends to be the most integrated representation. You know, Dr. King famously said, 11 o'clock Sunday morning, the most segregated hour in American life. Still is the case today. The Pentecostal church is the one that draws people of all colors.
It's interesting that you would draw a reference to Dr. King's analogy of the 11th o'clock hour being the most segregated in America. I recall from the reading, my brief reading of the book, Howard Thurman, who was one of the mentors of Dr. King, in his visit to India and meeting Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi remarked that the problem with the human rights movement in America at the time was that the churches and that the religion of Christianity was incapable or did not have the backbone morally or spiritually to lead. And it was at that point that Howard Thurman returned to the United States, radically changed. Can you speak to that in terms of...
Well, it's such a wonderful experience and an amazing story, and something that opened my eyes. I really didn't know it before I was involved with the research here. You see Thurman going over, and Thurman, of course, is the chaplain at Howard University in Washington, D.C., and Thurman goes over with a group of students, and the idea is to meet Gandhi, and he wants to meet this man who's supposedly the religious leader worldwide of his time. And initially he's taken aback because Gandhi's this small, emaciated guy. He doesn't have his chest puffed out, you know. He doesn't speak loudly in the way that we know so many ministers demand your attention if you're in their presence. So Gandhi instead offers Howard Thurman a piece of cotton, woven cotton, and starts talking to him about how this cotton is going to be the basis for the independence of Indians as they move away from Britain and they force the British out of India. And then he says, I also know that black people in America, free labor, slave labor, picked cotton and gave an economic basis to the southern land in the United States.
This is pre-globalization.
Right, and so Thurman's like, wait a second, I'm thinking this is a little guy, doesn't know much, you know, and he's quiet. Man, this guy, not only has he put thought into this gift, he's very aware of the African-American freedom struggle in the United States. And then Gandhi adds to the threat, if you will, by saying, now tell me how Christianity, the slave master's religion, is going to be a liberation theology for you. How is it going to help the black man to achieve freedom and equality in that country? Thurman, a deeply loved man who deeply loved his Christian beliefs, is shaken by it. He talks about having a Khyber Pass experience, because afterwards he goes out and he's traveling around and he's looking across the Khyber Pass and he realizes that his understanding of Christianity, his appreciation of Christianity, has now been challenged in such a way that he has to understand or undertake a new understanding of Christianity and see if it is capable of being the vehicle for social change. And so he comes back to the United States. He begins traveling around to black churches, to YMCA camps, to opportunities for interracial gatherings, and speaks about the idea that Gandhi has put forward of religion in conjunction with nonviolent social protest as the two key components that would allow for an explosion of social change that would liberate black people.
It's interesting that Howard Thurman is sort of lost in the whole cultural matrix in terms of the civil rights movement, when he was clearly one of the chief architects of much of the thinking of Dr. King.
Oh yeah, because in fact, when we were talking about him going around, he's at Morehouse when King is a student there. It makes a deep impression on King. And of course then King picks up that line of thought, and King puts it into action in terms of his nonviolent social protest. And you know, it seems to me, if you think about so much of the violence that exists in the world where there have been social struggles, you think about what goes on between the British and the Irish, the Protestants and the Catholics in those lanes. You think of the violence that marks it there. You think of South Africa and the fight there and the terrible violence they saw. You think of the Israelis and the Palestinians and the bloodshed we see to this day. Yet in this country, there was Dr. King following through on Howard Thurman's injunction taken from Mahatma Gandhi that it's possible to create social change by being true to a faith and acting nonviolently and requiring that you persuade other people by appeals to their conscience and to their shared belief in the divinity. That is a mark now of social movement in this country. You think about the social movement and everything from people who are opposed or support abortion to Hispanic rights, gay rights. I could go on, but it's built on that model that King put in place in the middle of the 20th century.
Let's fast forward to moving into the 21st century. If we look at the state of the black church today, one of the criticisms we hear leveled is that there are very few men involved in the black African American church, and certainly there are very few youth involved in the church. Now we have the so-called hip-hop movement, which is in many senses a political movement. How is that movement, in your opinion, interpreting the religious terrain? And is there a religious element or political theology to the hip-hop movement that you can discern?
It's not.
We worship you today. We worship you today. We worship you today.
Oh, you better mind. Oh, you better mind. You got to give an account at the judgment. You better